tiring running up and down doing this. Jeez. Hey guys, my name is Mark, and in this video I want to take a quick look at 3 affordable wide-angle vintage lens options that you might want to take a look at. So the first lens I want to talk about today is the Canon FD 24mm f2.8. I bought this lens a few years ago for about $80, and you can still find them for a good price depending on the version and condition. The build quality is typical of the Canon FD lineup. It feels pretty nice by today's standards, but compared to some other vintage lenses, it feels a little cheap. Now, it's light and small and balances nicely on my Sony a7S II. It's got a minimum focusing distance of just under 0.3 meters, which isn't that great for a 24mm lens. And on a full frame camera, it gives you about an 84-degree horizontal field of view, which is a lot of frame. And cropped in on an APS-C sensor, it's not quite as wide, but it still gives you a decent wide-angle lens option. Now, wide open at f2.8, it's not perfectly sharp, but gets better at f4. Now, if you are shooting landscapes with this lens, I would recommend dropping it down to f8 or f11 to maximize that edge-to-edge sharpness. Now, there is some barrel distortion, but it's easily corrected in Lightroom. Now, it's not a perfect lens, but it's easy to forgive its faults given the price point. Now, I definitely recommend if shooting on a mirrorless camera. Now, because of their flange distance, FD lenses don't really play well with DSLRs without an adapter like this one. Got a little glass element on the inside. This will slightly compromise the image quality and introduce a very small crop, so just keep that in mind if adapting FD lenses to a DSLR. Now, the next lens I want to talk about is the Pentacon 29mm f2.8. If you take a quick peek at the Pentacon and compare it physically to the Contax Carl Zeiss, you'll see some similarities. There is a bigger story here, and one that I want to save for a dedicated video. The Pentacon does share an ancestry with the Carl Zeiss line. That's definitely a vintage lens file segment for sure. So the Pentacon is a name derived from the pentaprism system in the single reflex camera. That's kind of cool, right? Also cool is this lens is a 29mm focal length, which is different. And extra points for the Made in GDR, or the German Democratic Republic, which is basically East Germany. Now at f2.8, it's as fast as the Canon FD lens, but at 29mm, it gives a narrower field of view on both a full frame and APS-C sensor camera. Now, one thing I love about this lens is its minimum focusing distance of just 0.25 meters. You can get nice and tight with this lens, and from here comes some pretty cool composition potential. It's not particularly sharp at f2.8, with some ghosting, but depending on what you're using for, it might not matter. Obviously, like most of these vintage lenses, stopping down, it improves the sharpness greatly. This particular one was my grandfather's lens, and while it does have some battle damage, it actually doesn't seem to impact the image quality much. Maybe the flaring? It's hard to tell, but it doesn't look like it. Now, I don't think this lens is as optically strong as the Pentacon 50mm f1.8, but if you can find one at a good price, the minimum focusing distance alone makes it a pretty decent option to consider. Now, the next lens I want to talk about is the super multi-coated Takumar 28mm f3.5. 1mm shorter than the Pentacon. Can you tell the difference? This Takumar is actually modded for cinema use. The 28mm focal length is actually a very popular one for video, and I've been testing this one out just to see how I like it. Now, you can find it online for about $50 to $150. It's not as fast as the Pentacon, but it's a bit sharper overall. And of course, it has that Takumar build quality, which you can't deny is fantastic. Now, with a minimum focusing distance of 0.4 meters, kind of makes you appreciate the Pentacon's 0.25 meters. Now, this lens is typically tack sharp across the aperture range, with great colors and contrast levels. At f3.5, it's not as fast as the other lenses, but I think that's a good thing. Sometimes having more of your frame in focus can present some cool challenges that help you grow as a photographer. At least that's what we tell ourselves, right? If I had to pick my favorite out of these three lenses, I'd probably have to go with the Canon FD 24mm. It's the widest option available out of the three, and you can still get one for a great price. Yes, it does have some flaws, but you'll find that with many vintage wide-angle lenses. The optical designs are quite complicated and very tough to correct for. Now, there's a reason that the very good ones are still extremely expensive. I'm looking at you, Contax 21mm f2.8. Whew! Look at that. Probably more than the modern one. Seriously, who is going to pay that much for this lens? Well, I would, of course. Wait, am I thinking that? Can they hear my thoughts? The Pentacon is also a good option, but I just haven't used it as much as I probably should have to get a really good sense of it. And the Takumar, of course, is fantastic, but I've got some other options like the 35mm f2 and the 20mm f4.5 that I really don't find myself reaching for this one all that much. I'd love to hear what you guys think. Any one of these lenses stand out more than the other? And maybe let me know what your favorite vintage wide-angle lens is, so I can write it down and look at it myself. What? Huh? Sorry, what? Pardon? All right, guys, well, thank you so much for watching. Stay safe out there, and we'll see you next time.